Streaming offers free and subscription video content. Titles like By Design, The God Who Speaks, and Asbury Revival, Desperate for More. You'll also find video versions of AFR programs. Visit afa.net and click on Streaming. Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Today's Tuesday, June the 4th, 2024. And as always, we thank you for listening to AFR. Well, joining me in studio is Wesley Wildman. Good morning, Wesley.
Good morning.
Morning, Fred Jackson.
Good morning, Tim.
And in Kansas City, KS, is our good friend Ray Pritchard. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Tim. How you doing?
Doing well. What's the weather report there in KC?
We're in this cycle, Tim, where every 2 or 3 days we're getting wild weather, and we're awaiting some more wild. Yeah. Well, you know, it's been bad in Dallas. It's been really rough in Oklahoma City, but we're kind of at the top of that tornado alley stuff.
Right.
And so, yeah, right now it's okay, but this afternoon, if I'm going to ride my bike, I got to do it right after the radio today.
I got you. How you doing with your treatments there?
Well, the radiation is done, and I've got about another, I'm counting it down, about another 48 days, and it will all be done, all completely done. And let me tell you, I'm going to be a happy camper when that last day is done.
Amen.
Is there any way that, is there any travel plans or ways to celebrate after the fact?
You know, in the summer, typically I do the Bible conference.
Sure.
We'll be in Oregon. We'll be in North Carolina, New York, and I guess somewhere Montana, I guess. So, Montana, up seeing our son Mark and his family. He pastors in Missoula. So, okay, this is way too much information, right? But August 22nd is our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And so we are planning, and I will be done. I'll be done with the treatment about 3 weeks before that. So we're planning to get away. We're still in deep negotiations
Sure.
About what to do and where to go.
That's exactly right.
But you'll be able to celebrate both your wedding anniversary and being through with all.
I got a challenge for you.
Yes, sir.
You want to celebrate your end of treatment for your cancer.
Right.
What is it?
Prostate cancer.
Yeah. So you're into treatment.
Mm-hmm.
You need to just hop on your bike and ride to Oregon.
Now that's a challenge.
Just to, you know what I'm saying? As a way of celebrating. Just to challenge yourself.
Be a man. A man. Get on your bike.
Be a man. Restore that testosterone.
That's right.
Riding all the way to
Just ride
Oregon.
right over the Rocky Mountains.
We laugh and joke about that because nobody in this studio or outside the studio on the radio is going to do that, meaning Ray. However, there are people that bike like that.
Yes, there are.
And they're serious about it, and they got their packs on.
They're
and
from outer space.
They're from outer space.
People have done that. Every now and then you'll hear about somebody for a good cause.
I know.
Biking from East Coast to West Coast.
Yeah, we've interviewed a few people that, not a few, but I think two that have biked coast to coast before.
Listen, I'm going to bike from here to Five Guys and get a great big hamburger.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's my plan.
That's my type of biking right there. Yes.
All right. Well, we just praise the Lord that you're on the way back to full health there.
Hey, thank you, Tim.
Right. Absolutely, brother. All right, Fred.
Lots happening in Washington these days. There was a hearing yesterday involving the face of COVID regulations, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and because he's back before he's officially retired, but he is back before these hearings because of emails that have become public recently, with an exchange with one of his former officials talking about hiding emails from Freedom of Information requests, that sort of thing. But yesterday, there was an interesting moment in the hearing when one of the Republicans, Congressman McCormick, it was, played a piece of audio from a October 2020 audiobook recording that Fauci gave. Now, I want you to listen carefully to this because, well, that's all I'm going to say because it has to do with what was the thinking, what was the reasoning, who was behind the forced shot mandates, masks, 6 feet, the whole thing. Have a listen to this. This is Fauci from 2020, cut number 1.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have universities and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us? You get vaccinated. When you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological and they get vaccinated.
When was that from?
This is October 2020, an audiobook recording of his biography.
We have forgotten so much. Now I'm glad some people in Washington have not on our side, meaning the conservative Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people and a lot of politicians and a lot of ordinary people have forgotten what all Fauci did during his was it about a year and a half or so.
When he almost a reign of terror.
It was.
Yes.
We forget that. We could go on for hours on this, but just one more that I called before it happened was, of course, he was all about masks, right? At first, he later then said that there's no point in ever wearing a mask.
No, it was reversed. At first, he said there's no point. He said when COVID hit our shores, he said you can wear a mask if you want to. I'm paraphrasing. If it makes you feel better, but it doesn't stop the spread of COVID.
Yeah.
Then he reversed himself
to all mask all day.
Mask up now.
And then he came back a third time and said there's no reason to wear a mask.
I don't know about that.
So that's so it happened in that order, all three of those. But most importantly, in that process, in the middle one, when he said you need to wear a mask, he also said 2 masks are better than one, and you should double up and wear both masks. He said that only makes
really.
Oh yeah, there's audio.
That?
Oh, he said that. He said that it makes as common sense to wear 2 masks.
What I don't like about what I heard right there, and I think it hit everybody the same way. So you're saying that the recording there we just heard of Dr. Fauci was when?
October 2020 in an audiobook recording of his biography.
Is he writing? So he must have been writing a biography prior to COVID.
Yes.
So then this is a recording in real time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play that again because that was so condescending.
Mm-hmm.
And listen how he says, buddy, like, oh yeah, you're going to get the shot. You're going to get the shot or we're going to make your life hell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I hear from what he says. I mean, play that again.
Once people feel empowered and protected legally, you are going to have universities and colleges are going to say, you want to come to this college, buddy? You're going to get vaccinated. Big corporations like Amazon and Facebook and all of those others are going to say, you want to work for us? You get vaccinated. When you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological and they get vaccinated.
What he's saying, BS. Okay, right there. I think that's when we bleeped it out. Ray, what's your reaction to this?
Condescending is one thing. Arrogant is another. Ignorant is another. Totalitarian might be the best word I can say about that. This is a totalitarian impulse. This is what people do who think who think that the pandemic would give them unlimited power. And to one extent, he's right. When you force people to make these hard choices, well, he thought he could just push people around. You know what? I was reminded him of that old saying, when people tell you who they are, believe them. Anthony Fauci has told us over and over again who he is. We ought to believe him. He's an authoritarian. He's a totalitarian. And he has finally been exposed.
Yeah. So who played that yesterday? Thank you. That good comment. I agree, Ray. Who played that?
It was Congressman McCormick, a Republican.
Played that?
Yes.
At the hearing.
He played it at the hearing, and it was almost like Fauci just sat there. He couldn't deny it.
No, it's his own voice.
That was the beauty of this.
Yeah.
He couldn't deny saying, "Well, I."
What did he say? Did he say anything?
I remember saying that, or
Right,
well, that's
right.
taken out of context. No, it's not taken out of context.
Right.
It's right out of your own recording, and I agree totally with what Ray is saying. What's scary about that is this totalitarian attitude. We're going to make your life miserable unless you do exactly.
Should Trump have fired him?
Yeah, he should have fired him.
Well, as the information like this came out, absolutely.
Talking about at the time, if you could go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you remember, Trump said
Or could he have even fired? Can you even fire a civil servant like that in that position?
he could not have given at minimum not given him the platform he did.
Yes.
But if you remember, Trump said himself, he said, I have many people telling me to fire or get rid of Fauci, including a lot of people in the conservative and Republican movement. A lot of business owners are telling me to fire him because it's going to kill the economy, and he didn't do it.
But he's saying a lot of people were advising him to do it, and he just decided not to.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I tell you what, the other thing that really bothers me about this, people lost their careers.
Yes.
People, thousands in our U.S. military lost their careers. Nurses lost their careers.
We all know, everybody knows somebody.
Yes.
Large, tens of thousands of small business owners shut down and never recovered.
Yes.
And all the big box stores, Walmart, Target, Lowe's, all the big box stores, they stayed open and pushed through all the mandates and stayed open, and they thrived and survived through it. Amazon, others, while all the small mom and pop local shops shut down and never came back.
And let's not forget the other confession from Fauci, the 6-foot rule, which led to the shutdown of most of the nation's public schools. There was no science behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Fauci tried to blame the CDC. He said that was the CDC's idea. But it was not based on any science. But look at all the classroom time our kids suffered. They lost that because of these bureaucrats just popping things out and saying, we're going to make you do this.
Yeah, any more clips we need to play from the hearing yesterday?
Not from that hearing, no.
Okay. Anyway, is that continued today or is that over?
No, that's over. There's a couple of more today, and
A couple more what?
hearings. That are
regarding COVID? Or?
Not regarding COVID, no, but I'm going to.
You mean congressional hearings, other issues?
Yes,
okay.
Sir. I've got you another one.
Okay.
The reason, I looked it up, the reason Fauci changed his mind the third time, it was in context to if you've got vaccinated, you don't need a mask.
Oh, I got you.
That makes sense.
No, it doesn't. But
No, actually, it does. You're right. No, it doesn't. None of it makes sense.
You're telling me that makes sense, but
Yes.
what you've told me about doesn't make sense.
Right, yes. That's
In the sense that he just,
and you do need, this gets very confusing of the timeline of all this that happened and all that he said, because he changed his mind many times on multiple things and he contradicted himself. He was also the one that said if you get the vaccine, you cannot spread COVID and you cannot get COVID. And I forget
he
where
said that.
Oh yeah, he said that out of his mouth. Those were his words.
Well, you got to be fired.
Well, he told.
When I say fired, you're completely and totally discredited.
Yes, 100%.
If he said, I don't look that up. For
Oh
sure.
no, those are his words. I saw the video clip before I came downstairs.
I'm saying if you get the COVID vaccine, you won't.
He was in an interview with a young lady who was interviewing him, saying, "I wanted to get back to normal life. I want to get back. I got a pool party coming up. I'm inviting my friends." And he said, "Well, you need." And then she said, "What can I do to encourage them to get vaccinated?" And he said, "You let them know that if you get vaccinated, that you cannot get COVID and you cannot spread COVID if you get vaccinated." I forget the date of that and the timeline. I didn't see that, but those were out of his mouth in an interview about how to convince people to get the shot.
Okay. Will you?
I'll get the audio for tomorrow.
Yeah, will you get the audio?
Yeah, we'll bring the audio in tomorrow.
I want to play that if you can get it. All right, you're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. We just hope, folks, that we can get your blood pressure just as high.
Fauci can do that.
Just as high as we can get it today. And Fred's off to a good start for us here. So he's bringing in the all-stars of hypertension, Dr. Anthony Fauci being the first one. What do you got next, Fred?
Up next,
The
Attorney General of the United States,
head exploded.
Merrick Garland.
Okay, that mayor head's exploded here.
Yes. He is before a hearing right now, Jim Jordan's committee, the House Judiciary Committee. All right, number one in this, in his opening statement, he repeated that he was refusing to release the audio of the transcript that the special counsel Hur did with President Biden, in which, remember Hur, at the end, he said, he's a dawdling old man, wouldn't make any sense to charge him with his keeping of these classified documents. Remember all that. So Garland repeated this morning in his opening statement, I'm not going to give in to that because it might discourage people down the road from giving interviews to the FBI, et cetera, et cetera. But then there was this exchange. I'm going to play you a little bit of this between Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz and the Attorney General. Gaetz basically said, now tell me, Attorney General, when you were a lawyer and you were a judge prior to becoming Attorney General, did you give it to any political parties? And he said, no, there's a federal rule. You can't do that. And then he said, would you recuse yourself from a case if you had given to a political party? And that's when Garland got his back up. He says, I know what you're trying to do. You're referring to the Trump case in New York, and I'm not going to answer your question. All right? Because remember, Marchand, the judge in New York, made donations to Joe Biden and has a daughter that is a political activist and raises money against the Republican Party. All right, so I want you to hear the exchange between Congressman Matt Gaetz and Attorney General Merrick Garland. Cut 12.
Communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump, you can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fani Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
You make a request. We'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about.
All right, so what Gaetz was referring to there is that a high-ranking official in the AG's office suddenly took a job in the New York prosecutor's office and helped prosecute former President Trump. And Garland just did not want to talk about that.
Wow, wonder why.
Yeah.
So that was Merrick Garland, the AG, and that's Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida.
Yes. It was a very powerful exchange, and Garland's just...
You know what Garland should have said? He should have said, our office did not collude or meet with the people you've mentioned, the offices you mentioned, about anything, period.
Yeah.
That's all you got to say.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that's right. And why not answer the question about, do you think a judge should recuse himself when he's been giving money to the political opponent of the defendant?
Right.
And he wouldn't answer that.
Yeah. Well, because there is no good answer right there for that one. But that was Merrick Garland, so he's on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
Today. You're listening to Today's Issues on American Family Radio. By the way, J. Warner Wallace will be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Many of you have read his books, Cold Case being a big one. He's going to be on with us about his new book called The Truth in True Crime. What investigation death teaches us about the meaning of life. So J. Warner Wallace will be with us later on in the program. All right, next story, Fred.
Well, we kind of mentioned this yesterday, but today apparently President Joe Biden is going to make his official announcement on his executive action he's going to take. He says to try to bring some control. And this is amazing. He created the crisis at the border.
I know.
And now he's saying, look at me. I'm going to, because the Republicans will not agree to legislation, I'm going to come to the rescue. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm only going to allow 2,500 illegal immigrants into the country every day. All right? So I'm going to put
And then what happens? What kicks in then?
What? Well, he says he's going to stop it, but okay.
So we get, take a number?
Yeah.
At the border?
Everybody knows.
Like a lottery?
Yes.
Or something? You got to be 2,500 a day, so you stand in line,
Mm-hmm.
like for a Taylor Swift concert. Make sure you get in.
Yeah. But you know what? This is the thing, and also before another hearing today on Capitol Hill is FBI Director Christopher Wray in connection with this, because Christopher Wray has said publicly, and this is from a hearing in March, he is very concerned about the criminal element that is entering our country through the southern border. Cut number 5.
From an FBI perspective, we are seeing a wide array of very dangerous threats that emanate from the border, and that includes everything from the drug trafficking. An awful lot of the violent crime in the United States is at the hands of gangs who are themselves involved in the distribution of that fentanyl.
So that's just fentanyl. Not to mention the most recent cases. You have the Venezuelan illegal immigrant charged in the murder of that nursing student in Georgia. And then just 48 hours ago, you had 2 New York police officers shot by a suspect now who also is in the country illegally from Venezuela. All of them have, those two guys have entered since Joe Biden basically did away with all the restrictions that Trump had put in place.
If we remember, though, just a couple of weeks back, Biden and his administration and those that are responsible for what's going on at the border said that everything was fine and nothing was wrong.
Oh, yeah, they did. They maintained that for the first, now, 3 years.
Right.
Yes.
So what changed in the last couple of weeks?
The election.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's what's changed is the election.
Yeah, this is Bush window dressing. He's trying to make the best of the worst issue for him. Right
also,
now.
too, backing up, remember also day one of his presidency, he overturned. I saw the number a couple weeks back when I looked at it, but I know it was over 10. I think it was close to 15. But he overturned or did away with 10 executive orders that had to do with border safety.
That were in place under President Trump.
Right.
And also, Ray, you remember Mayorkas. We
Right.
had that quote, the Secretary of Homeland Security. He remember he was on television after the inauguration. He got into office. He was bragging about how they had gotten rid of all Trump's restrictions that were in place.
The whole thing is so phony, Tim. It's exactly what you said. Joe Biden's policies created this crisis, created it, and now he wants to issue some.
Act like he's a savior.
That's right.
Yeah,
I don't think
people aren't buying it.
They are not going to buy it.
No, people aren't buying it.
He criticized the Republicans for not wanting to support the border bill about 2 months ago that had funding for all these other countries and and hardly any money for the border. In addition to that, they were supposed to cut it off at 5,000. Well, he's cutting it off at 2,500 here. I mean, it's a mess.
All right, Fred. Thank you, Fred, for this half hour of just sunshine and hope for America. You've done your service.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna have to have some popcorn and coffee. Calm down.
You're gonna take your break here.
I'm gonna take my break. J. Warner Wallace. Maybe he'll soothe us. He'll be our guest in a few minutes.
It's my turn. Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Probably the most famous river in the world is the Jordan River. It isn't a large stream. In fact, many people would hesitate to even call it a river at all. It begins near Benias, in the area where Caesarea Philippi stood in New Testament times, and flows the distance of approximately 100 miles to the Dead Sea. It is a very crooked and weaving stream between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, the two major bodies of water which it connects. The river covers a distance of nearly 200 miles in that 65-mile stretch. The river is from 3 to 10 feet deep and has an average width of between 90 and 100 feet. It contains some 30 species of fish, the most famous being known as St. Peter's fish. According to tradition, it was in the mouth of this species that the famous disciple found the coin. The river begins at a height of some 1,200 feet above sea level. It ends at a depth of some 1,300 feet below sea level. Most of the stream is below the level of the sea. This causes the temperatures along its course to rise as high as 118 degrees in places during the month of August. The prophet Elisha sent the Syrian army general Naaman to the Jordan to be healed of his leprosy. Naaman reluctantly washed himself in the water and was healed. And it was over this river that Moses looked into the Promised Land from Mount Nebo. John the Baptist centered much of his ministry around the river. He used its water to baptize his converts. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan by John the Baptist. John was very reluctant to baptize Jesus and only did so upon the insistence of the Galilean. The traditional site of the baptism of Jesus is about 4 miles north of the Dead Sea. The Jordan represents a dividing line to biblical students. It was over this river that Joshua led the Israelites. It divided the wandering Israelites from their past meanderings and their new home in Canaan. It also is a dividing line in the life of Christ, for it was at the Jordan that he publicly embarked upon his ministry. Perhaps, as legend has it, Jesus was baptized at the same crossing used by the children of Israel to enter the Promised Land. Today, literally thousands of Christians visit the river to be baptized and to renew their baptism as a symbol of their faith. Pilgrims even take home water from this stream with which to baptize in their own land. Millions of Christians who have never seen the Jordan have symbolically crossed it, for they too have crossed over that dividing line in making public their ministry for this carpenter from Nazareth, regardless of the occupation they fulfill. We said that the Jordan was probably the most famous river in the world, and that fame is due primarily to its association with the man from Galilee.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. Psalm 14, verse 2.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening. I'm Tim Wildman with Fred Jackson, Wesley Wildman, and Ray Pritchard. And, well, many of you have read the Cold Case books by J. Warner Wallace. He is our guest now. He serves as senior fellow at the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, and he's also an adjunct professor of apologetics at Biola University, and he's got a new book out. Jay Warner, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate being with all of you.
How long have you been adjunct professor?
Well, so when I first came out of my law enforcement career, which was probably 2013.
Yeah.
I think that same year they wanted me to come over and start teaching courses at Biola, which I have. I just finished a course last Saturday and Friday and Saturday. So sometimes our apologetics program is kind of set up so you can take it in bursts. You know, you can take it, some of it's distance, some of it's in class, some of it is a kind of a 2-day, all day kind of a thing. So we've operated in a number of different ways. So I'd say probably about over 10 years now. Crazy how fast that went.
All right. So your new book is titled what?
It's The Truth in True Crime, What Investigating Death Teaches You About the Meaning of Life. It's just a very different departure for me. Most of my books, as you know, are apologetics books that make the case for either the reliability of Scripture or for God's existence or for why we should have a more reasonable faith or the impact of Jesus on culture. This is a book that really is kind of 15 rules for life that you learn from 15 different true crime stories that I've experienced over my career, because it turns out those are the times, those kinds of cases you're working are really when you start to see what's in the heart of all of us, right? Not just the suspects and victims that you're dealing with. You see the same kind of cautionary tales again and again and again and again, and I've always wanted to write a book where I can just say, hey, you know what? It turns out that we are shaped a certain way that is revealed in these crimes that is actually been written about for thousands of years. It's the biblical description of our it's biblical anthropology, basically. And so I wanted to write a book that kind of showed that.
Give us one of the examples from the book.
Well, one of these examples in the book, and it's probably the one that I talk about the most because I think it's the biggest key to human flourishing. So these are 15 rules for life that will help us flourish, that are confirmed by true crime stories and confirmed by modern sociological studies, but they're also very ancient. And in one story we're talking about here is a local legend in our gang community years ago who was a bit of a celebrity based on his exploits. And the story in this chapter tells about what actually happened to this guy. But here's what's interesting about it. It reveals an aspect of human flourishing that I bet if we asked most non-believers, we said, you know what? What's the one thing you could embrace that would change your life most significantly for the better? Every dimension of flourishing would improve. Your longevity, your physical health, your mental health, the depth of your relationships, your marriage, your school, how well you do at school, the grades you get, the amount of income you're going to earn, whether you'll be a good employee, a bad employee. All of these things are determined really most dramatically by one thing you could embrace. And it's called, and the studies have been going on for about 35 years on this, so I've collected all of them. They're in the book. But it's this attribute we know as humility. And I think most of us who aren't Christians, if you said, so what is it? What's the one thing you could do? I've had people say things like, well, I don't know, exercise. I mean, they aren't quite sure what it is. But it turns out it's humility. And the studies demonstrate this. And this, of course, if this particular gangster I was working had had any humility, he'd be alive today. But he's not because he didn't. Now, what's interesting about that is think about it. Of all the worldviews that might develop humility, which one would do it best? Well, it turns out that any worldview in which you earn something you expect to receive, that doesn't develop humility. In fact, it develops just the opposite. I had a friend, Mike Adams, who years ago used to tease. He was writing a book, How to Become Humble in 10 Easy Steps and How I Made It in 8. The problem is if you pursue humility, you become prideful about your pursuit of humility. So it turns out the one worldview that might, so if you're a secular atheist, you believe that you're going to do certain things and you're going to get a certain reward. You're going to go to school, you're going to get a diploma, you're going to do certain things at your job, you're going to get a promotion. It's all about a meritocracy. Can I earn what I get? But that always develops pride. And theistic worldviews, spiritual worldviews, in which you think you can earn something before a holy God will also develop pride. This is why Jesus says those two men in the synagogue, the one has, God, I'm not like that other guy, because we compare each other. You'd have to develop a worldview and present a worldview that says, you know what, there's nothing you can do to earn this. It's not about what you can earn. We're going to give it to you as a free gift. Salvation is going to be offered to you as a free gift. So Paul says, so that no one can boast. It's the antidote for celebrity. It's the antidote for pride, because it is so deeply grounded in the first act of humility. You have to embrace the idea that, hey, there's a God and you're not him, and you can do nothing to earn your way into that God's presence. It has to be given to you freely. Now, interestingly, That could be a coincidence that the one attribute that contributes most to our human flourishing happens to be personified in the humility that Jesus bore on the cross. Or it could be that this is the worldview that best gets you because it's from your maker, it's from your creator, who knows how you were designed and what you were designed for and how you could best function as designed.
All right. And again, the title of the book is what, and is it available now?
Yes, The Truth in True Crime, and you can just find it at thetruthinTrueCrime.com. So we've got, I think, a pretty decent offer to help people to see what it's about, and also to give you some free resources. Hopefully, it'll help you become a better defender of your beliefs.
How long were you a cold case investigator?
Well, so I was official. So we were assigning cold cases collaterally. So
Where was this? Where was this?
This is in Los Angeles County, California, and so
like Dragnet.
Well, yeah. My dad actually started in that job in 1962. But I started working these. I was assigned to other details, and eventually we had such success that they formed a detail for cold cases. So all in all, I probably did them about 15 years.
Yeah. Now, is that so? You weren't a private investigator. You were a part of the Los Angeles Police Department. But is that right?
Well, no. So I was in Los Angeles County. There's about 34 municipal agencies in California. So I was one of those. We were called Torrance, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles.
I got you.
So
I guess what I'm asking is, with cold cases, those would be described as cases of crime, violent crime, I guess, murder, that were never solved, right?
Right. So cold cases are only homicides. Every other kind of crime has a statute of limitations, and eventually it'll close. You can't even work it anymore. But murders don't have any statute of limitations. So my dad's case, I did a case for my dad. He first investigated it in 1972. It didn't get solved till 2019. But you can go back and do a case that old because there's no statute of limitations.
How did DNA change your profession there?
Well, it has changed the investigation of cold cases nationally, probably pretty dramatically. It wasn't as big an influence on me, only because not every case has DNA, especially if you're going back to the 70s when no one even could predict that we should collect this over here because there might be a DNA possibility in the future. So they just didn't know what to collect and not collect. So most of my cases, all but one, that one I told you about that we solved in 2019. All but that one were solved without DNA. But I think that, so for those cases that were probably went cold in the 90s and beyond, DNA has been a significant help, I would say.
I'll just say this, Columbo was my favorite show in the 70s.
Well, it still is, believe it or not. It still is one of the, that and Monk, believe it or not. If you were to ask people, what's your favorite detective show? Yeah. It turns out it's a comedy.
The guy, you're talking about the guy who washes his hands all the time. He's
yes.
He's what is he, some kind of a...
Obsessive compulsive.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, we're talking to Jay Warner Wallace. Brand new book out. Tell folks how they can go to your website and get the book.
Yep, just visit thetruthinTrueCrime.com, and you'll see that we actually have also a case-makers course that we're offering for anyone who buys the book, because we want people to actually learn how to defend what they believe, especially in a culture right now that is definitely challenging us. So it's time for us to be able to meet that challenge.
Yeah. Ray, did you have a question for Jay Warner?
Mr. Wallace, thank you so much for writing this. In a lifetime, I'm sort of just thumbing through. And I got to say, I've never seen a book exactly like this. And I want to say to our listeners, this is The Truth in True Crime. Mr. Wallace, you've written a book I don't think anybody else has written, and that's an unusual thing to say today. Just to give a little, I guess I do have a question here, but just to give our listeners a little idea of these 15, you call them leads. Lead number 1, a pool of blood under my feet. Lead number 2, fake IDs and a stolen identity. Lead number 3, a target, a bullseye, and a circle of concern. What I'm saying, folks, is this is a very readable book, and you've taken principles and stories from true crime and applied it to the Christian life in a way I've never seen done before. Can I just ask you about one of these? I have to pick up. I don't know which one to pick, but I'm going to pick number 11 because of the title, The Killer Inside. The Killer Inside. Tell our listeners, I just want them to get a little flavor of your book. So what is The Killer Inside?
Well, this is a story about a case, and I've had a lot of these where the people who eventually get arrested, you just can't believe that they were capable of doing the murder. I mean, when you're working cold case murders, you're working a guy who did one murder 30 years ago, and he's not a serial killer. He just did one, and then for the next 30 years, he lives among us, and you wouldn't even know that he was even capable of such a thing. They become leaders in your community. They become your elders on your deacon board, your elder board. They become doctors, and I've arrested fire captains, and they end up in all the other aspects of life because we have to ask a fundamental question. Why are we surprised that these kinds of folks might have done something terrible in the past? Do we believe, and this is what the culture is kind of telling us, that people are innately good and pure and innocent, and then they're just corrupted by their families, their environments, their circumstances, the governmental systems even? Or do we believe that humans are innately fallen and broken, and we are the corruptors of families and systems and organizations, even church organizations? Which of these two things is it? In other words, are we good or are we bad? Or are we some combination of both? Well, it turns out the data that you see I've written about it in the book, even from a secular perspective, would tell you that, yeah, we're not innately innocent, because although we can do altruistic things, we'll do them only so long as they benefit us. So, for example, if resources get tight, even the most altruistic amongst us now is hoarding toilet paper like we all did during the pandemic. Why are we doing that? Because our innate desire is self-preservation at the cost of anyone else. And so that's the question: is does our nature, our basic nature, does it match what the secular humanists want us to believe, or does it match what biblical descriptions of our fallen nature would tell us and have us believe? Which is it? And it makes a difference which one you believe. So, for example, when I'm sitting across a table from somebody who's accused of a murder, if I don't know the real true nature of who I am, I might be fooled into thinking that the entire world is divided between good people and bad people, and this table is dividing this room between a good person and a bad person, when in fact the Scripture tells me that no, that's not the case. For example, if you don't know who you are, you're much less likely to be forgiving or even accepting or even reach out to others that you think are just so far below you that there's no point in it. It turns out a proper view of who we are will actually influence the way we treat others. And you see this in the story of Simon, right, where Jesus comes to Simon's dinner, and there's a woman from the city there, and she's lavishing Jesus with everything, and Simon hasn't done anything for Jesus, and he's kind of thinking that this woman shouldn't even be touching Jesus, and Jesus offers that parable about two people who owe a lot of money, and one owes more than the other, and they're both forgiven the debt, and he asks Simon, who do you think is more happy about having their debt forgiven? And Simon says, well, of course, the person who owes the most. The whole point of the story is that she understood her sin. She understood her true nature and knew her need for forgiveness. Simon didn't. And the least forgiving people you know and that I know are people for whom they think they have no need for forgiveness. If you don't think you need forgiveness, you're very unforgiving of others because you think that you're actually above them. The reality of it is, once I realized who I really was, it changed the way I interacted with people who were on the other side of the table. And I think that's good. That's probably a piece of advice that I'd like for all of us to think about seriously. And it all comes down to, is there a killer inside?
I want to ask you one final question, and then we'll let you go here. But this isn't really a cold case question, just a police question, I guess, or a question in your profession. What is the number one reason why people commit homicide?
Well, there's only 3 reasons why anyone has ever committed a homicide.
Okay, I'm going to write
only
these
3.
down. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, here you go. You ready?
Yeah.
It's also the same 3 reasons why any of us does anything stupid, why any pastor falls from his position. And it's the same thing over and over and over again. I learned this before I was ever a Christian. It's just not 1,000 reasons why this woman might be dead. There's only 3. Find me somebody who fits one of those 3, and we're probably on our way. And it comes down to financial greed.
What did you say? Financial greed?
Financial greed.
Okay.
Money. Sexual lust, relationships, sex, and the pursuit of power. And that pursuit of power section is probably the biggest one. So if I feel disrespected, if one gangster disrespects another and ends up killing over it, what is that about? It's pursuit of power. If someone walks into a room and kills 30 people of a different color, what is that about? I think my color is more important than your color. That's a power issue.
Okay.
So even celebrity can be the pursuit of power. So it turns out sex, money, and power, it's a 1 John 2 principle. It's in Scripture, but it's also true for every crime we work. And so I would say that third category, the pursuit of power, is often, because sometimes it's just that I want to live my life the way that I want to live it, and I can't live it that way as long as my wife is alive. What is that? That's the pursuit of power, the freedom, the autonomy to do whatever you want to do. So a lot of the stuff that I'm working is in that third category, the power category.
Financial greed,
sexual lust,
lust, like in jealousy.
Well, so if it's jealousy, like what are you jealous about? It's going to be one of those three things. It's going to be a money, sex, or power thing that you're jealous of. So jealousy is not its own category. It's just the effect of those three. If you're feeling vengeful, what are you feeling vengeful about? It's going to be one of those three. There is no fourth category. It's just those three. So it's why I say that, all the
money, sex, or power.
Money, sex, or power. It's pretty simple. And if you're a pastor, it's pretty simple to protect yourself, right? You know now where to protect yourself. But here's the problem for pastors, is that we typically think that, hey, we want you to be famous because then you have a bigger church. So as a group, we're like, hey, yeah, we're okay with your efforts to be known, but those are just as dangerous as the money and the sex issues. Power is dangerous, and it often leads to the other two, because I've never known anyone who didn't scratch one of those three itches that didn't eventually scratch the other two.
That's a good country song right there.
There you go.
What you had there at the end there.
Well,
listen.
Go ahead. I'll let you go ahead and write it.
I'll write it.
I won't even take any credit.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Jay Warner
Thanks
Wallace joining us.
Appreciate
Appreciate it, my friend. Thank you. All right.
You.
He joins us. I'm not sure what town where you live. Maybe California. I don't know exactly, but. You're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Yes, sir.
Obviously, great interview. Great, really
You're
good
welcome.
thing. Yeah, you're welcome. A really good interview. Great thinker. Bible verse that came to mind.
What about him, though?
What, him? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's going to take a couple people to get that.
You're embarrassing me with these flattering comments.
Well, now do I have to tell you that I'm not talking about you?
Oh, well, that may lead to a pursuit of power on my part. But you better watch your back. That's what I got to say, because you talk bad about me. Here, go ahead.
On the record, too.
Yes.
Philippians 2:3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others more important than yourself." One of the first Bible verses I chose to memorize, and as he pointed out at the beginning when we were interviewing about his book, the importance of humility is a one major principle in the success in all areas of your life, whether that's in your occupation, whether that's in education, whether that's in marriage, in your family, in your parenting. Humility is a huge component, and obviously that's a biblical.
Yeah. He's a good friend of Frank Turek's. I know that.
Frank Turek's endorsed the book.
Turek. Yeah, anyway, very popular speaker around the country as well. All right, you're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. What's your next story, Fred?
When you think of the country's most liberal newspapers, you probably think of what? New York Times? I would think, competing against the New York Times, Washington Post.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What if I told you that the Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post lost more than $70 million last year and lost 50% of its audience in the same period?
Well, if I were the owner, that would lead me to a crime of passion, which is financial greed.
Exactly.
That's the number one thing.
In
all seriousness, when I was in journalism school a long time ago, at least back in that era, up until the last maybe 10 years or so, since the advent, or maybe not the advent, but at least the rise, the surge in website news. Okay, that is that the news that emanated from the New York Times and from the Washington Post, for example, that whatever they cared about, whatever was important with that, and the three networks, ABC, CBS, NBC at the time, those were big news agencies. And whatever they thought was important was spread all over the country. You know this, Fred, having studied your profession, the journalism profession. So the Washington Post has been around a long time. They're the ones who were famous for breaking the story about Richard Nixon and Watergate and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Very influential paper, especially among our nation's leaders in Washington, D.C. They care a lot about what the Washington Post says. And they were very profitable. But now, because they've gone, I'm guessing because a combination of people aren't buying newspapers anymore like they used to, right?
Yeah, but they have a subscription based on online.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They have ways to make money.
Yes, but primarily it's because of their left-wing ideology.
Exactly.
That they're losing business.
Well, yesterday, the Washington Post publisher and CEO William Lewis called a staff meeting. And here's the verdict on why they're losing readers and why they're losing so much money. This is a direct quote of Mr. Lewis to the staff who gathered there. Quote, "People are not reading your stuff," end quote. That's pretty blunt.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, he's right about that.
Well,
Yeah.
and that came just a few hours after the executive editor there, Sally Busby, who's only been there 3 years, was let go. Now, yesterday there was an AP story saying she left the paper, but she was let go after she refused to accept a plan to try to get that faltering newspaper back on track. Because what Mr. Lewis wants to do, the CEO there, is break it into 3 different kind of news divisions. I'm sure it has to do with digital and products and that sort of thing. Now, what the story from Fox this morning does not mention, I do believe, and this is interesting, one of the guys that Mr. Lewis is bringing in to try to help things out is a former Wall Street Journal editor-in-chief, Matt Murray. Now, you've got this is almost like somebody from Fox News being hired by CNN to try to
Wall Street Journal is generally conservative.
Generally conservative.
Yeah.
So this is a result. I think it has to do a whole lot with their editorial stance.
Yeah.
And the American people certainly don't want to pay money for left-wing ideology. It's the opposite of that is why Fox is so successful financially.
Right.
This is good news.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to cover some difficult news, obviously, or some bad news at times, but this is good news because this is just one more example of many examples over the last 5 years or so where the phrase "if you go woke, you go broke," eventually it catches up with you because your bank account runs out because people don't donate to this, which is why I'll just give you 2 quick ones. So CNN's numbers over the last 4 or 5 years, they've tanked. They're having to figure out how that's gonna their viewership
way down.
Another one just along the ideology, leaving the media outlet. But BLM, okay, so they raised their money, and then they realized that a lot of their money was not going toward the cause. Then they start going, and they start losing their money. They start losing their influence, their platform. The bottom line is, if you get down to the heart of the woke movement, it is division, it's hatred, it's unforgiving, it's not uniting people. It's doing the opposite of what it claims to do. And so once it surfaces, then you get this. And so with the WAPO, they're obviously having to figure out that their target audience is not paying for what they want, apparently.
Yeah.
Or there's not a large enough audience.
The Washington Post newspaper I think they used to be more or less hard news, but now they've become so far left in their content that people are not subscribing.
Yep.
Or they're losing a lot of subscribers. People, as you say, Wesley, don't want to pay for that. All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes with more of today's issues on the American Family Radio Network.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
All God asks of you is faithfulness. Headlines in USA Today. Did you see it this morning? All the odds are against us. Faithfulness is the word.
There's a place for you on the battle line. Engage in the fight for America's families. Visit AFA.net and then take your position. A message from the American Family Association.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. South Korea is getting ready to suspend a military deal with the North after a fight over balloons carrying trash. Jonathan Savage has more.
Over the last week, North Korea has sent balloons carrying bags of waste paper, cloth, cigarette butts and excrement over the border to the south. South Korea's response is to signal a return to frontline military operations like firing exercises and loudspeaker broadcasts. The decision will take effect once the North Koreans receive formal notification. The two countries agreed to lower military tensions in 2018. Pyongyang announced it would end the balloon campaign 2 days ago, but the South Korean Prime Minister told a cabinet meeting the North's provocations pose a real threat to the public. Jonathan Savage, Fox News.
The federal trial is now underway in Delaware for Hunter Biden's alleged illegal possession of a .38 revolver. This trial is under political scrutiny due to Biden's father, the president's re-election, but also because of the president taking steps to further restrict legal firearms transfers. Eben Brown reports.
Hunter Biden is accused of lying on the federal form used to initiate a background check when purchasing a firearm. The form shows he checked no to questions about using controlled substances, which would preclude a person from legally obtaining the gun, but the younger Biden admitted in his book to when and how often he used crack cocaine, and the photos recovered from his laptop also depict his usage during the same time frame. Delaware, the Biden family home state, requires no permits or licenses to buy or openly carry a handgun.
Some Republicans planning to push back after former President Trump was convicted on multiple felony counts.
8 Republican senators claiming the White House has, quote, made a mockery of the rule of law. A letter obtained by Fox News shows those senators will not allow any increases in non-security related funding or vote for any of President Biden's judicial nominees. Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin says that concerns him.
There are many competent, able candidates for the judicial vacancies around our country, and they shouldn't be swept away by any politics of the moment.
A Manhattan jury found former President Trump guilty on 34 felony counts related to hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. On Capitol Hill, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
A well-known Christian author has little patience with those who want to sit out the battle for a godly culture. Steve Jordahl reports.
Eric Metaxas is following up his recent bestseller, Letter to the American Church, with Religionless Christianity, the title taken from Dietrich Bonhoeffer's assertion that losing itself in the trappings of religion weakens the ability of the church to engage the culture. Appearing on The Core on AFR, Metaxas called out 2 influential Christians who appear to have fallen into the trap: New York Times columnist David French and Christianity Today editor Russell Moore.
David French just endorsed Joe Biden. I mean, if you can endorse Joe Biden, I don't even know how I could have a conversation anymore. And again, Russell Moore is in the same camp. To be a columnist for the New York Times, it's like more than 30 pieces of silver. It's a horrible thing when you basically fool yourself into thinking you're doing some good when you're really supposed to stand against it.
He says both men seem to think that to act on political convictions somehow negates or lessens your commitment to the Christian faith.
They say, oh, when you get political, you're just a Christian nationalist. Well, let me tell you something. You know, George Washington, Billy Graham, Abraham Lincoln, a lot of heroes have behaved in a way that today's Christian left would call them Christian nationalists.
Metaxas is leaning into the title.
And I just think that the term Christian nationalist, that's just the devil's term for true Christian faith.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
U.S. job openings fell in April to the lowest level since 2021. The Labor Department reported today that employers posted 8.1 million vacancies in April, down from a revised 8.4 million in March. Monthly job openings have come down steadily from a peak of 12.2 million in March 2022. More news online at afn.net and the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hey, here's a question for you. Are you squeezing the most out of each kingdom advancing opportunity? In The Stand, Rick Robertson tells the story about a friend who took advantage of every chance to honor God by serving others. Do you know someone like that and want to be more like them? Rick's article, A Life That Excels, shows God's instruction on how we please Him and excel when we serve Him and others faithfully. Stop by afa.net/thestand and read A Life That Excels today.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We got 24 and a half more minutes today of this show. We thank you for listening. Tim Wildman, Wesley Wildman, and Ray Pritchard, and we're joined now by Steve Paisley Jordahl. Good morning, Brother Steve.
Morning, everybody.
How you doing, Steve?
I am well.
What are you looking forward to this summer, Steve? What's on tap for you?
Summer. Well, I'm next week. I am headed to, and my wife are headed to Indianapolis for the Southern Baptist Convention.
Are you a messenger?
My wife is a messenger. I'm a reporter. I'll be working.
For those who don't know about the Southern Baptist Convention, they have an annual national gathering, and the people who go there to make, I guess, decisions for the denomination are called messengers, right?
Yes.
Were you ever one, Ray?
I never was. Now, next week's going to be a big deal up there. I mean, the law amendment is on the table.
The law amendment is on the table.
What is that, Ray?
Steve, can you explain that? You're a reporter.
I can.
What do y'all tell? Both you guys are Southern Baptists, right?
It's kind of
That's
inside baseball stuff, but it's a pretty big deal for the denomination.
Yeah, so the last year, the big issue at the convention in New Orleans was whether or not you could be a Southern Baptist church and have a woman pastor, whether she could be a teaching
sure you
pastor
want to do
or
this?
even yeah, right.
Yeah, we've already opened that can of worms, so go
or
ahead.
even have
Go ahead.
the title pastor. So the law amendment is an amendment to the Constitution, to the, I guess it's the Baptist
maybe?
message, faith and message is what it's called.
Yeah.
Anyway, it says you cannot. It harkens and quotes the biblical mandate that you cannot. A pastor must be a man and have other scriptural qualifications. And basically, what the law amendment is meant to do is it's meant to put this issue to bed, so that we don't have to go every year and say, "Well, here's a church. What about this? Here's a church. What about this?" So that's the issue. That's the law amendment. That's one of the things that's going to be talked about there.
Right. The Southern Baptist Convention, though, it's a association, but all the churches are independent and autonomous.
Yeah,
right?
there you are at the heart of the issue. How does the convention, which is a voluntary association, right? It's not like the Methodist Church, the United Methodist Church or the Episcopal Church or the Presbyterian Church, and
certainly
the
not
denomination
like
holds the title,
Catholics,
right? Not like the Catholic Church.
Right.
It's a very voluntary association, and so how do you? I don't know how many churches Southern Baptists have, Steve. What is it, 30-some thousand?
Yeah, somewhere
or more, maybe. I mean.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands. How do you ride herd on all those churches who are in voluntary association and enforce your understanding of biblical standards? So I expect, Steve, it'll be a lively discussion.
But why,
It will.
I'm not sure why. Of course, I don't understand the ins and outs of everything.
More than 50,000 churches. Sorry.
Southern Baptist.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
But I don't know how would you pass a I don't know what you would call it,
change
a law, for lack of a better word.
Right. Let's call it an amendment to the bylaws. Yeah. Something like that.
Because I'm sure you have a creed. I mean, you have these things we believe, like
the Baptist faith.
Yeah,
and message
but that's pretty
statement.
fundamental things. But
Sure,
it probably doesn't
sure.
get into depth on Whether or not to allow a woman to be a pastor.
Well, it will now.
But that's what they're suggesting.
Yeah, so it is a voluntary association, but it's voluntary on both sides. So if a church does anything to flaunt, that goes against what the SBC considers fundamental core biblical truths, they can be basically disfellowship. The Southern Baptist Convention can break and say, we're not going to, you're not in the Southern Baptist Convention anymore. This is the case that happened with Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's church in Southern California last year. They have ordained 3 or 4 women on staff, and Rick Warren basically.
And he was an SBC.
It was the largest church in the SBC, I think, at one point. And he said, basically came to New Orleans and said, "I'm Rick Warren. I can do whatever I want." And the SBC said, "No, you can't." So Saddleback Church is no longer in the SBC. And you know where this voluntary association thing becomes very, very sticky? Because you probably also know that the Southern Baptist Convention has been going through an issue with abuse. The Houston Chronicle wanted to make a name for itself, and so it got a list of abuse allegations and published it, and it's made the Southern Baptist Convention jump through a whole lot of hoops. I say that way because the abuse issue in the Southern Baptist Convention is far less. I mean, it's nowhere comparable to the Catholic Church at all, although that's what the Houston Chronicle wanted to make it look like. And it's even less than just what's the abuse that you get in public schools. But here's where this voluntary association becomes problematic. It's because you want to ask your Southern Baptist churches to have certain procedures in line when you hire a youth worker or somebody to work with the kids. You want to make sure that they're safe, and everybody, the churches and the SBC will, but legally, the SBC can't make them do that. So when somebody comes and is accused of abuse, they want to bring a lawsuit against the SBC, then the SBC has to say, we don't really have the authority to make them do something. So it gets very interesting, to say the least, right, Ray?
Well, we've gone into the weeds here a little bit. That's a good explanation, but it is a problem, Tim. The bigger question here is, if you're going to have a denomination, how broad do you want your fellowship to be, and how narrow do you want to draw the lines, and where do you want to draw the lines? And that's what the Southern Baptists are. Well, for instance, a generation ago, they decided back in the 80s with the late 70s, the conservative resurgence. Led by Dr. Criswell and what? Yes, I thank you.
Adrian Rogers,
you read my mind. Adrian Rogers,
Richard Land.
Right. Yeah. They said if you have decided you don't believe in biblical inerrancy, if you believe there are going to be errors somewhere found in the Bible, you're something, but you're not really a Southern Baptist. And they cleaned house to do that. So now this is and now they're.
So how's this vote going to go down?
The law amendment will pass.
Okay, so the law amendment would state for the record that the official stance of the SBC is that the senior pastor positions.
Any pastor, anybody ordained or that fills the role of pastor, and that's a role that is understood by Southern Baptists to mean has authority in the church.
Will be.
Yeah, because some people call their youth minister a youth pastor.
Right.
There's some pushback.
Or
worship pastor, and they don't necessarily doesn't necessarily mean that they have authority, teaching authority in the church or whatever. That also is going to be clarified. You will see a whole lot fewer worship pastors or children's pastors.
You get worship leaders
or ministers or that kind of thing. So,
all right.
We hope that made
you?
Does that make everything clear?
We could go for another hour and a half on that if you want.
We wouldn't be any clearer at the end of the hour, but
nor would we have anybody listening.
That's right. Yes, all three are true.
That's right.
All right. Hey, let's talk about this. I wanted to get to this because I think it's remarkable. In California, there is a bill. It's called SB 1414 that would make soliciting a child for sex who is less than 16 years old basically a felony, punishable by up to 16 years. I'm sorry, by up to 3 years in jail. As it stands now, soliciting a minor is nothing but a misdemeanor. Now, there are members, this is California, there are members of the Democrat Party.
Misdemeanor is like a parking ticket.
Wait a minute.
Basically.
Yeah, I'm confused.
You can be put up to a year in prison and a $10,000 fine.
For molesting a child? Or soliciting
a child, yes.
And that's in California?
That's in California.
That's all?
Currently, that's it. That's why they want to make this a felony.
I would like to repeat this in California.
Yeah, in California, I know. Yeah.
And so, but there's a lot of people apparently within the legislature of California, Democrats, who see this as a way to put more black and brown people in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are opposing this bill to make solicitation a felony. Well, a state senator, her name is Susan Talamantes Eggman from Stockton. She is being term limited out of the legislature, so she won't be there next year. But she had something to say to her colleagues about this. And I want you to hear it. This is cut 10.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I'd like to say, as a progressive, proud member of this body for the last 12 years, I'm done. I'm done with us protecting people who would buy and abuse our children. I'm done. I don't want to send more black and brown men to prison. I don't want more people in prison, but I don't want people buying girls. I don't want people buying little girls anymore. And I'm tired of saying it's okay and that we have to protect the men who do it. As a mental health professional and as a social worker, I can tell you I've spent my entire career working with people who have been wounded. I'm not going to say beyond repair, but they have been wounded to their core by the abuse that's been heaped on them, oftentimes by those that they love and look to protect them. And if their parents won't do it, then we should. Again, I am not arguing that we open the gates to flood our prisons with people, but I am arguing that we have a moral responsibility to say enough. Enough. We have given away enough on this area, and we've got to move back into the center, or we all look like fools and laughing stocks. And what do we stand for? I ask all of you to watch the documentary that Senator Grove was in, Senator from Kern County was just in, that talked about this very place in Sacramento where girls are being bought and sold. Men are being given a little slap in the hand or a couple days, and then they're back out again, and they do the same thing. They get caught over and over and over again, and somehow that's okay. It's not okay. It is not okay anymore, and no more am I watching. Like I said, I'm leaving, but the rest of you who are going to be here for a while, let's get our stuff together and really start focusing on some of the important things. We talk about learning, and we talk about being safe. This is like at the core of it. And a lot of these kids can be throwaway kids. They're poor kids. They're kids of color. But they shouldn't have to live a life determined by what happens to them by others at a very young age, and by have the Democratic Party of California say it's okay. It's not okay. And I'm not doing it anymore, and I hope none of you do too. We have to be able to draw a line, and for me, I'm drawing a line. I urge your I vote.
Okay, that was very powerful. That was about 2 minutes or 3 minutes there. The lady you just heard is a retiring state senator.
Yes.
In the California legislature. She is a left-winger. She calls herself a proud progressive is what she called her. But she's just chastising her fellow, quote, progressives for defending, for not, how would you categorize what they're doing there? They're not giving, they're letting sexual, she called them buying girls.
Yes.
Sexual predators.
Sexual predators, letting them off with light sentences. Is that what she was saying?
Yes.
And she's done. That's what she was saying. I'm done.
She's done.
She said that we all heard her there. You got to bring this back to the center, and get the woke ideology out of this and focus on just
protecting the girls, and also punishing the criminals.
Many of the girls are brown or of color, which is the other teams, the opposing team's argument. We don't want to put more black people in prison, so we can't make this a felony. Well, What about the black women who are being sex
But
trafficked?
that's the reason crime in general is going up. Violent crime in general is going up is because the idea being the quote criminal justice reform. I don't want to get us too far off message here, but the idea is we need to know what the skin color is of the individual who committed the crimes before we do anything about it or not, because Ray, this is how these people view the world.
You know, I'm amazed, Tim, because so much of what that woman said could have been said by somebody on the right,
That's
and
what
it
you
would have
expect,
been and it would have been completely discounted, right?
Yep.
So here you have a self-proclaimed progressive who is retiring and saying enough is enough. And she said there's this place, I don't know what she was talking about, where they can where men can come and they can they can buy.
Right. That's what she said. She
Yeah.
she knew about it. Maybe it's notorious there in Sacramento or somewhere.
Yeah, it would have to be because she was saying that there's a history of men being
predators arrested.
and
You
then
know,
put back and then arrested back at the same spot
Yeah,
again.
they just repeat because they're not punished. And the isn't that the bottom line of the point she's making, Steve, is that that you
make it
when you don't punish crime sufficiently, you're going to get more of it. Is that what she's saying?
I don't know that she's specifically saying that. I think she'd believe that. What she's saying is that there are certain lines that even progressive Democrats who want to do the defund the police thing and everything, certain lines that you shouldn't cross.
Yeah. All right,
Putting
next story.
Children in danger.
Next story.
All right, let's talk about what's going on over in Israel, because the President Biden has I tried to get some sound in this. I just ran out of time. But President Biden says that Israel is offering up a ceasefire option that would potentially end the war in Gaza. President Biden, in his little announcement of this, was strangely kind of dual, and I have done this, and Israel is doing this, but he's basically saying that Israel is offering a three-part plan. The first part would be a temporary ceasefire, a 6-week ceasefire immediately, and return of some hostages, and then a negotiation for a permanent ceasefire, allowing everybody to move back into Gaza and wherever they were, and then the third part being delivering aid and rebuilding Gaza. And Biden says Israel's the one that's is offering this. They're proposing this. And by the way, we're urging Israel to please accept this deal that you have proposed. It's weird because you'd think if they proposed it, they wouldn't have to be told to accept it. Benjamin Netanyahu says not so fast. It's not accurate. What they're saying is not accurate. So, and there's a lot of little clues in here that Joe Biden's real issue here and real what he's trying to accomplish by pushing this peace plan is to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu. So it is all is not as it seems in Gaza and the war there.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
I think Joe Biden is conflicted. I think he really doesn't care about U.S. hostages. He's not done anything to put pressure on Hamas at all. Everything he said has been in order to facilitate Hamas. There's this mythical two-state solution that nobody really thinks can work. And I think that Joe Biden, whether through sheer animosity towards Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel, or just from incompetence, is doing everything he can to make this
prolong
and to get Israel to leave Hamas in place, which is not going to happen as far as Israel is concerned.
Yeah. All right, next story.
All right. Well, as you know, we have entered June, and June is in some people like to say that June is a month.
It's a wedding month.
It's a wedding.
Wedding
to celebrate weddings.
Yeah.
But some people would like to celebrate weddings, different type of weddings. It has been declared, as you know, Pride Month, which means
really.
Yes,
Yeah.
which means
What are you talking about?
a lot of Americans are proud of their sin.
You haven't gotten out much. Just go in any retail store, right at checkout.
Pride Month, huh?
Yeah.
How long has this been going on?
Oh boy,
Too long.
Yeah, too long. In fact, if you hang on long enough, I think they're going to overplay. They're not. think they are. They are currently overplaying their hand.
Yeah.
Well, the NFL seems to think so because NFL teams are split on whether to even recognize this celebration.
Which they were probably, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine 5 years ago they were all united on it.
I don't know that either, but I would imagine the same.
The point is, as we get further along in this, people are getting tired of it. We're getting over it, which is why Target is pulling out in some areas.
Yeah.
A lot of their stores. So what was the story here?
Well, so the NFL is split. 11 NFL teams out of 32 have decided they're not going to participate in this, which means they didn't change their team logo to have these pride colors, and they're not doing any pride events and that kind of stuff. The 11 teams.
Well, it's not football season, though.
No, but everybody wants to virtue signal on their websites and with their logos and.
But you're saying some of the
or make a public statement. Sometimes that's what they do. They'll make a public statement.
Yeah, I got you.
Yes, well, 11 teams have decided they're just not going to do it this year. They've not said we hate gay people or anything like that.
That's good.
Exactly.
They have not participated in any kind of
I wouldn't advise that as a PR move.
No,
I think not.
It is a net loss to participate. If you're a company or if you are in this case, if you're an NFL team, it's a net loss, in my opinion. And I think the finances will show it's a net loss. You don't gain anything. You may not, you don't gain anything for going all in with because you're going to have so many people like you're seeing in the Target stores saying, well, I'm not going to, that doesn't help
There's
me.
no need. Listen, we've had pride now for 20 years. Okay, we get it.
Yeah.
I said the other day, you're gay and lesbian. Okay, well, I'm going to clap for you. Okay, you're going to tell us every year.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it. Okay,
we
got it, and
right,
and you just live your life, and they've got everything they've ever wanted.
Sure,
they can marry now. They're in the military openly.
They got churches, Church, there's plenty of gay
church
churches.
Denominations are embracing LGBTQ.
They can put drag shows in front of kids. They can give kids pornography.
There's no persecution there to back the people that are persecuted are Ray, or
the only thing they don't have is they're not rid of us yet.
Yeah. That's it.
We are still hanging around.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, I will say this too. There are a lot of LGBTQ people, especially lesbian and gay. They're not necessarily antagonistic or political, or they don't hate Christians. They do want to live their lives and be left alone. But by the same, But there's a lot of them also that are into this push the agenda on everybody, and it's just never ending, and you've got to make an issue of your sexuality every day, or either you feel like you're hated or something, or you're less of a person, and you need to make the Christians bow the knee to the LGBTQ movement. That's the objective here. But the interesting thing is here, I think a lot of businesses and in this case professional sports teams are just saying this. We're just not participating in promoting what we. Now the LGBTQ crowd, we would say it's promoting an agenda. They would say no, it's just recognizing a marginalized group of people who.
They aren't marginalized.
I know they're not marginalized. Okay, they're not marginalized. The LGBT. If you look at the average income, they make more than the straight person on as far as salaries go, on average. And of course, you don't have kids to support.
Right.
So you don't most of the time. So
families.
Anyway, but the point, what was the name of the teams that did not?
Yes, the name of the teams: the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, Tennessee Titans, former Dallas Texans.
Was that the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yes. Denver Ponies, Dallas Cowboys, Detroit Lions, Green Bay Packers, New Orleans Saints, and the Atlanta Falcons.
I see what you did there.
Did you?
Yeah. We all saw that.
AFC West
Las Vegas Raiders fans calling
Las Vegas Raiders not on that list, unfortunately.
Calling Denver the Ponies.
That's right.
Those are the teams that decided they were not going to participate in.
Good for them.
The Pride Month. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks to Steve, Wesley, and Fred and Jay Warner Wallace and Brent Creeley, our producer. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the American Family Association.
The war against biblical principles rages on numerous fronts. The internet, Hollywood, Washington, D.C., America's corporate boardrooms, and the list goes on. At American Family Association, we're committed to standing against the enemies of God, the enemies of your family. And we recognize it's an impossible task without God's favor and your partnership. Thank you for being faithful to pray for this ministry, to give financially, and to respond to our calls for activism. What you do on the home front is crucial to what we do on the battlefront. We praise God for your faithfulness, and may He give us many victories in the battles ahead as we work together to restore our nation's biblical foundations.
Well, hey, 8 Days of Hope family. Well, as God continues to expand this ministry, we cherish your involvement, whether that's through praying, volunteering, or donating. I know it can be hard to kind of stay up to date on all that God is doing through 8 Days of Hope, and we'd hate for you to miss an opportunity to get involved. So today, we invite you to find us on social media to see regular updates on how we're